And the IDF is firmly and plainly denying that they struck this UN building. How can you be sure that it was a UN building that you saw get hit? And how could you be sure that it was an IDF shell?
Yeah, there were flags of the UN over it, and we know since the UN got into Gaza, they have marked their places with either fences or flags over the place, and with their vehicles parking in front of those buildings. And we understand that this is not the only building inside Deir al-Balah, because since the start of the war on Gaza, as we wrote to Drop Sign News with Sharif, the first story we reduced together, that Deir al-Balah is the last standing city in the besieged territory. So the UN and the other international humanitarian organizations make sure that they are going to be stationed in the most or in the safest place inside Gaza. That is Deir al-Balah, which has been the least hit over the course of the genocide. That's why it's not the only building. We have Abu Husni Street, which is in the middle of Deir al-Balah, that has several organizations like WFP and UNRWA, as well as UN. But the fact is that this was along in Al-Birka area, along the eastern outskirts of Deir al-Balah, the eastern part, and it was marked clearly with flags, and there were cars parked outside the building with clear logo, like emblazoned with logos of the UN, and at the same time the building itself has many flags over it. So it was clear that the UN building, and I know, by the way, before this attack and before this hit, I was very aware of all buildings that are working inside Deir al-Balah, because I'm in the city and have been observing that over time, and I know where the buildings are, the organizations that were
that's working. Where you live.
Yeah, that's why I live. That's why I'm telling you that It was clearly a UN building, and Israel hit it. But I think Israel is making the point based on the arbitrary shelling that they did not deliberately hit it. And this is something I might agree with, because it's been arbitrary, as I'm telling you, it's been random. So that's why they are claiming right now that they haven't hit the place. But already in the end, even if you purposefully or not purposefully hit the place, it is you. It's a tank from your side. So it's not going to be on the other side, because Hamas again, hasn't fired back a single bullet in Israel, despite the fact that they have killed more than 420 people in Gaza over the course of the past 2 days. This is far from the fact that they have killed 150 during the ceasefire. So it's very clear that they hit this place. They must be held accountable for it, and they really must. I don't know what they have to do, but of course Israel is responsible for that, and I can make sure that because I was in the place and I saw that myself. So there is no way that this can be debunked at all, because I was in the place and I survived it very, very miraculously.
And Sharif, what can you tell us about what we're hearing from Israel, what we're hearing from other involved parties? You know, the first-person story there from Abu Bakr is unbelievable, and having that reporting from him. What else do we know about how other people are reacting, or other entities are reacting to what happened?
Well, to this story, the news is just coming out so far. The only official statement we have is from the Ministry of Health, saying that 1 person was killed and 4 were injured in an attack on what they described as UN facility, and the Israeli military denying that. But we have to say that this comes in context of this renewed genocide within a genocide that began yesterday, with Israel, unleashing one of the deadliest wave of bombardments since this began 17 months ago. The Ministry of Health just put out the latest figures. Over the past 2 days, 430 people have been killed, including over 180 children, which is one of the highest death tolls of children in a single wave of airstrikes ever. And, once again, our timelines were filled with the images of dead children, of dead babies, of families being wiped out, of the wails and shrieks of parents. And it came without warning, and it came across all areas of Gaza, very heavily in the north of Gaza, where the Ministry of Health has also put out the kind of numbers of where people were killed, and it was 156 people were killed in Gaza, the governorate of Gaza, which is where Gaza City is, in Jabalia. This was an area that was already completely devastated by the Israeli military assault, and it's also the area where over 500,000 Palestinians had returned to following the ceasefire. many of them returning and with creating makeshift shelters or putting tents on the rubble of their homes, and that's where they're living. And this is the area that was heavily bombed yesterday. And, Abu Bakr called me when all of this began, and we spoke, and he was seeing helicopters flying low outside of his window, relentless strikes and so forth. The next morning, I contacted another drop site contributor, Hussam Shabat, who's in Beit Hanun, which is all the way in the northeastern edge of Gaza. He replied with one word: death. That's what he wrote. Another drop site contributor, journalist Rasha Abu Jalal, who is among those people who went from Deir al-Balah to Gaza City after the ceasefire went into effect. An airstrike hit right next to her home, collapsed onto her home. She somehow miraculously survived with her husband and 5 children. And she wrote a dispatch for that on drop site that you can read. But, and I think it's important to understand when we're talking about context, this seems to have been Israel's plan all along. This ceasefire that went into effect, that was agreed on and went into effect on January 19th, this was supposed to be a 3-phase deal, the first phase being 42 days. But we know that Israel was really only intending for this to be a phase 1 deal. As Abu Bakr mentioned, we saw them violate the ceasefire nearly every single day since January 19th, killing Palestinians in Gaza on a regular basis. Over 150 have been killed, even before this massive aerial assault on Tuesday morning. They refused to allow in the agreed upon number of tents into Gaza. They did not allow in a single mobile home, as agreed upon in the deal. They didn't allow bulldozers and other forms of reconstruction equipment. And during all of this, they also refused to hold negotiations on phase 2. And phase 2, the negotiations were supposed to start on February 3rd. And it was supposed to entail the release of all the remaining Israeli captives in exchange for a substantive number of Palestinians being held by Israel, the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and the beginning of a permanent ceasefire. And this is something Netanyahu has said plainly that they do not want. Hamas spent weeks calling for serious talks on the second phase to begin. Israel simply did not allow the negotiations to go forward. After the first phase ended in early March, Netanyahu said Israel agreed to what has been described as a new U.S. proposal, in which Hamas would release half the remaining captives that it has in return for a 7-week extension. And kind of that's it, nothing in return. And of course, this was not part of the agreement that was set. Hamas rejected that. And then, Israel reinforced a total blockade on March 2nd. Not a single truck has been allowed into Gaza for the past 17 days. No food, no medicine, no fuel. They cut electricity, which affected a desalination plant, which severely limited the availability of water to hundreds of thousands of people, mostly in Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis. Prices are skyrocketing. People can't afford. So this is a policy of forced starvation that is being reimposed. And we reported at drop site, they also started denying doctors and international humanitarian aid workers entry into Gaza on relief missions at unprecedented rates. And then, on Tuesday, we saw this deadliest wave of bombardments. And we've also seen that the Israeli military has sent out ordering people to evacuate, mostly along eastern Gaza, near the border, in places like Beit Hanun, places like Khoza and Khan Yunis, forcing people into the center of the territory. And this indicates that Israel is renewing plans for ground operations, because this is what we saw last time. And today we have the Wall Street Journal reporting, citing Israeli security sources, that they are planning to escalate a major ground operation using an even bigger force that they used last time, because much of the manpower that they needed on the northern border with Lebanon, they don't need that there anymore because the attacks with Hezbollah have ceased. So, this is where it stands now, and it's very ominous.
And Abu Bakr, you were telling me just before you came on that your indications were as well that it looks like another ground invasion is underway. What are you seeing that makes you believe that what the Israelis are telling the Wall Street Journal is accurate?
Yeah, because I think the shelling has intensified over the past 12 hours, particularly during the night hours, as we've been hearing that. It's not all about this, because when we see like the plumes of smoke from the skyline view that we're seeing at the moment, because I have a highest point